Ahem, ahem. So there's this snail that walks into a car dealership. He looks around, spots the flashiest sports car on the lot and says to the salesman, "I'll take that one, but I want you to glue a bunch of other snails all over it." The salesman, understandably confused, asks, "Why on earth would you want that?" And the snail replies, "Well, I want people to look at my car and say, 'Look at that S car go.'" Now, speaking of things that are slow and flashy, ever heard of a tortoise who thought he was a racehorse? Well, there was one. He was a bit of a dreamer, you see. One day he decided he wanted to be the fastest creature on land. So he started training. He'd run around the yard, slowly but surely, every day. He even got himself a tiny saddle and racing stripes painted on his shell. And when he was asked why he was doing all of this, he'd simply reply, "Slow and steady may win the race, but slow and stylish wins the fans." But it's not just animals who can be a bit eccentric. Humans have their moments too. Take, for instance, the story of a man who decided he wanted to be a tree. Yes, you heard it right. A tree. He spent his days standing in the park, arms outstretched, covered in leaves. He'd stay there all day, rain or shine. And when people asked him why he was doing it, he'd reply, "I just wanted to branch out a bit." And then there's the story of the world's most unconventional chef. This guy was no ordinary cook. Instead of using regular ingredients, he'd use weird things like socks, shoelaces, and even old newspapers. When asked about his bizarre cooking methods, he'd simply shrug and say, "Well, I believe in a well-read diet." Now, in case you're wondering, these stories might not be entirely true, but they do teach us something important, that no matter how strange, how outlandish, or how downright ridiculous life can be, it's always full of surprises. And the best way to approach it? With a good sense of humor. So, remember the snail who wanted to be fast? Well, he might not have been the quickest creature on the road, but he sure had the most puns per hour. And the tortoise? He never did win a race, but he sure won a lot of hearts. As for the man who wanted to be a tree, well, he might not have sprouted any leaves, but he sure did plant a seed of thought. And the unconventional chef? His dishes might not have been edible, but they sure were food for thought. And on that note, let's wrap things up with a classic joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Now, isn't that a positively charged note to end on? So until next time, remember to keep your humor charged, your puns ready, and your anecdotes as outlandish as possible. Because life's too short to be anything but hilariously unpredictable.